Morning, everyone. Meanwhile, the other participants join us. Let us see an overview of client-side rendering and server-side rendering. And within 5-10 minutes, I hope everyone will be joining. Then we will start the coding, the steps to achieve the server-side rendering. Let me share my PPT. All right. So we can see here. Already we have seen what is the difference between client-side rendering and server-side rendering. Today we will have just a glance upon it so that we can recover our concepts. And coming to the point, client-side rendering, you have seen there are browser downloads and a minimal HTML page is rendered. That is, there is always a complete binding of JavaScript in your client side. This fills into the content. And then next you have server-side rendering on the other hand that renders the React components, and the output is the HTML content, that is your static HTML UI. It's totally your declarative UI you are able to see. And when you combine these two, it is known as an isomorphic app. Everyone, participants, are you able to see my slideshow? Someone please help me. Thank you. Thank you. So the slideshow is being corrected. So the important keyword was isomorphic app. Whenever they say an isomorphic app means we are combining these two features, and wherever necessary, we would be switching upon these two. And in order to switch upon these two, you can create your own client.js and server.js both. So that is the advantage of ReactJS, since being a library, unlike other programming, scripting languages used, they are totally frameworks, right? So ReactJS is a simple library. So in this, what happens is if you want to include a new feature, if you want to delete a new feature also, you can call them as a library itself. So that is the advantage of ReactJS. And then when you come to cons of rendering the React on the server, it will improve the performance. This is what we have seen. It can degrade the performance for the very first time when it is trying to do all parts of bindings and all. This is also we have seen. It increases the response time. You can see it won't waste the server's time. And when it takes too longer to load, it is only for the first time. Then thereafter, it is very easy to render the page. And complexity, of course, because everything is handled by server side. So there is a complexity in creating the application. And when we should go for server side rendering, this is the very important thing. Despite of being many cons, there are important pros also. So that's why we go for server side rendering. And there are some situations we have to use it. This is also we have seen that like SEO. Whenever a web application needs an SEO, the search engine crawls and checks for the keywords, certain keywords, and understands and renders it. So this means if there is a blank page, no matter however the site is helpful, we can't see this site because the search engine crawler is unable to fetch it. So it won't be displaying it also. That is, it won't come in your search results. So that is the case. And yeah, of course, Google search engine. So you can see, so this is how we'll see the page. And suppose there is no content while rendering, so it won't be able to fetch this page. So this is how it is empty. Now, if you come to another important point is you have written your routes for each and every page, like your dashboard or other pages in your web application, like home page or contact page or whatever it is. Then your crawler will go for your URL and check whether the page is available or not, and then fetch and render. This will complete in one click because already we have our history APIs. Now, in order to improve the performance, what we have to do is we have to depend on service resources, and we have to increase the speed of the network also. So on the previous session, we have seen how we are taking the things to fire from 500 milliseconds to 20 milliseconds. So that is the same procedure we have to follow while we are coding also. We have to keep in mind that how we are using our Express.js to write the code to listen to the server, and how it is able to implement the things, convert the entire HTML and its binding to your static HTML page, which is viewed by the user. Now, so this part will happen, and when there is a first interaction, there is a different time level. So let me help you with paint so that we can understand the concept even more clearly by visualizing it. So now let us suppose I have client 1, client 2 and client 3. That is our user 1, user 2, user 3. So this is the scenario. And what these three are doing is they are trying to work on Facebook. They are sending some request to Facebook. So sending request to Facebook is nothing but sending request to the Facebook server. So whenever there is a request, it will go and approach the server. Now let us suppose our client 1 wants to send a friend request. And yeah, of course. Let me write in short. He wants to send a friend request, and the client 2, that is user 2, wants to see some marketplace or something, and user 3 is trying to see the data of some of his friends. So let us suppose he is trying to check with Bharat data. Let us suppose. Now in this 3 requests, the first 2 requests will get executed because it is the access rights given for them to in order to use them. And when you come for the third thing, you can observe that this part will not happen because the data of Facebook is always private. No one can check over the other person's data. No rights is given into this. And all these request and response will follow the either the HTTP or HTTPS. This hypertext transfer protocol and hypertext transfer protocol with security. S means security. So whenever you use HTTPS, your end data, whichever you send, that is the response, whichever we are sending back again to our clients, is encrypted. So there is no leakage of the data. So here there is no leakage of the data. And suppose if you are using HTTP, the third party can attack the data. Attack is possible here. And in order to avoid the attack also, there are few ways you can use JWT and write your encryption and decryption on your own end. So that is also possible. Now nowadays modern web applications use only HTTPS and Facebook also uses only HTTPS. So this manner we are able to achieve our entire interaction between the client and server. So this is what actually happens. So in this part, what happens is, now let us return to our PowerPoint presentation. In this part, we have to also check the server resources and as well as the network speed. So if there are n number of requests, there shouldn't be any content heavy sites which will low down the frequency or the bandwidth and decrease the performance of the website. So this part should be made clear, and we have to improve the performance also. And of course, there may be issues of how much data you are using, or your screen within 2, 3, 4 seconds, or you should visit the site again in those cases. And if it is the first interaction time, it will obviously take some time. And yeah, comparisons and other Android and iPhone, we will see in the end of the session, like in the last class, React Native. So React, you can see when you render on the server, these are the cons. The scripting, rendering, and whatever other things are there. So we can observe in this graph manner how fast we are able to achieve the things. Now, initially what we have to do is, as usual, we have to set our React application, like using CPX or whichever manner you want to create it. You can use create app using NPX. And then what happens is, there is a custom Webpack project. So this Webpack also you have to include. As we have seen earlier, there are few installation commands and we have to use them similar to Web. So these installation commands will be provided and we can follow those and just install those. What happens when we use Webpack, I have already told you. Again, I will rewind them. What happens is there will be few following structures of ES6 and then there will be few following structures of JavaScript and there will be few following structures of ECA. So all these, when you use in one point, at that time, Webpack will help you to normalize all these utilities and you can directly import them. So the main problem occurs when you are trying to import some of the utilities of these three. It is better always to use Webpack so that you will easily recognize what is the exact package you are going to use. And then you can ignore SAS or SCSS if possible. Always it is recommended to use only CSS because static HTML is to be rendered at the client side. So it is better to use CSS. And even if you have SAS or SCSS, you can extract it to CSS. Now, this is the very important step, and we will be we will be going through PPT and as well as the code, and then we will finally achieve our server-side rendering. Now in our application, we split these two, and what we are going to do is we are going to put this setup first of all. So you can see the Babel has been installed. The first thing we have done. And then in index.js, the application always starts its compilation. Once it starts the compilation, the DOM which it has to refer is your root and which is your app itself. So this is the entry point of the application we understand. And then the app component by default will render you counter component. So we have written something called counter component. This is what we have created, and we have given a UI to that counter component, and that will be rendered because we have used the counter component in our app component. So in order to do that, what we can do is directly give npm start command and run the application thereafter. So these are the basic steps, how you create your app and how you install all your necessary packages, and then you write your own component which has to render, and you import that component in your app in order to check what happens in the UI, and that is rendered to the user. Now the next thing which we have to understand is about the app which we have written, that is in counter component. In your counter component, what is that you are writing? So that part is important. So first, what happens in counter component is there is some button which is known as increment button. The counter increments by this button, and when it reaches the value 3, the button will be disabled. There is an option where you can write the code of the button to be enabled and disabled. And for this, I can write a function which will enable the button and disable the button. We will see in the code part also. Now, next step, what we have to do, if we open the inspector tool, we are able to see the generated HTML. And as our index.html has only the blank div app, the element, the HTML we are seeing above is generated on the client side by app component. So if it is a regular React app, this is what happens. So the response we can see when we run the program, what the network response is. I will show you that also. Please remember what happens is we are able to see only the blank div ID app. And if we inspect the response from development server, we would see this element. That also we can see with the help of network response running this. If you observe this diagram, here we can see what is the counter component consists of. This is a label counter widget, and this is the button we were talking about. And once we keep on clicking here, the value will increase 1, 2, 3. Thereafter, this button will get disabled. So this is the code we have written, and this is just a label. And you can observe in the inspect part, when you right click and inspect, there I should navigate to network, and in that I have to navigate to response. There if you observe, we have our ID app. So with this we can understand that this code is entirely displaying only the dynamic content, not the static content of the web page. So now this is what usually happens in the client side render. That is by default, any React app will act like this. Next, setting up an server side. Now what happens here is, currently we have installed the Webpack development server, and you have to set your things to dev server and as well as production server. Like there is a command when you run npm build --prod. Prod means production, and I can give npm run start, which will directly take to your dev server. And we have to, of course, input the dev props. Now, so what we are doing is we are going with Node.js server, the most commonly used one. So So don't worry about ng inits and all. What we are interested is in only these two things. So now you can observe the command npm run build, which will include your servers in whichever constant you have written. If you have written the constant for dev server, will fetch that, and if you have written for production server, it will fetch that, and it will fetch the both if you have written any if else and or the switch case depending upon which session ID this has to happen. In that same manner also we can write. So we can write the logic depending upon our usage, and I can create my own client.js and as well as server.js for a single application. Both I can create. And we will see the concept also. It is known as hydration, and we'll see in the further slides. So now once you give this command npm run build, there is a dist directory will get created. Usually we don't find this dist directory before you build your application. Only when you build it to either dev serve or production serve, this dist directory will be created. And usually this directory is used to run your application live. So when you are running your application live, the files which are generated in the dist is only used. Now the actual magic happens here. If you run a CSR file, it will be the same as your div was appearing, like only app appears there, it is equal to app. Now when you run using SSR, what happens is entire static HTML appears. That is I am saying when we inspect in this part. Instead of div app, we will be able to see the entire HTML we have written. Like here we must have written the label and then the div, and inside that again the label and then the input and then the button. All this will be seen. That we will see in further slide how it exactly happens. Now you can see in the dist the same things have been there, but the only difference is you have your build and all the files are same. And everywhere we find there is a dot map. Dot map is it is trying to map to your exact application wherever necessary. So that part is written. And for this today's sample project, we are going to use express.js to create the HTTP server. And you can also create HTTPS server. The syntax is almost all same. Only there will be a little bit of differences in the way you write the post and get requests. That's it. And we are free to choose any framework, not only Express.js, whatever. But the thing is, you have to achieve this. And I hope everyone remember that we have to achieve caching and as well as single page application and as well as the server side code. So when we write all these three only, our total this aim is achieved. So now you can observe I create a folder server and I include my express.js in this manner and write the logic to serve my index.html. That part also we will see. Now you can see this is the server folder and in that we have our express.js. Okay. So for now, just listen to me and slowly we will go into the coding. Thereafter, what we have to do is you have to run this using node, which imports the file, and then why the reason is this is the initialization, and we can write our custom behaviors in express.js in whatever manner you want. The initial thing which you have to do is create a prop in order to use the express. Let me shift to the code so that I can show you some part of the code. We will be switching between the code. So right now I am opening my Visual Studio Code so that will take some time. Just Give me some time. So this is the entire application we were speaking about. So you can find the visualization in your index.js, how it is importing and exporting your counter. So the actual point is here. From this point, you directly go to your app. In your app also, you have index.js. It's importing the app component and exporting the app component. And we are able to render the app. So what we have written is our counter. And a post request. You can see both the paths we have defined. In this also you have defined your component, what it has to render. You can see the Babel config. Once you install, this will happen automatically. Then this part is what we have seen in our after installation. So as soon as we set up, we will have this available with us. There was a sudden interruption in the connection. So let us continue. Sir, sir please give me host, sir. Surya, sir. Surya Narayan, sir. Okay, participants. So now what actually happens is, so whenever we have seen what are the components we have to use, and we have seen what are the other files, how we have to include for each JSX its own JavaScript. So whatever you want to render it to the UI, you bind it to its own JavaScript and its own SAS. So next what we are going to do is, so this is the client side part which we have seen already. So each server, you are writing its own index.js, and the reason why is you have to customize the behavior of your express.js. So what are all you are installing or including and the scripts you are binding, all we can find by default it will be stored in our package.json file. In that file, you can find what you have installed and all. One of the file where you can understand what are all the other external things you have included. And then we can start with our node server itself. And for this program, it is HTTP server, but the recommendation would be HTTPS server. In order to render into your browser, we need our disk directory, which will be once you run your npm run build. Now, still we see that this part hasn't changed. Yes. So again, the response is only our app ID only, and, not the exact HTML, static HTML which we have written. So in order to do that, the first point we have to do is we have to listen to our server, and this part we have done in the last session itself. We have seen the syntax how to listen to a server port of a Node.js using Express.js, and everything seems to be working fine. But there is an empty app we have seen, and so in order to do that, we will make use of entry point index.js and our app itself. So if you find here, so this is the way we are accessing the root element. This syntax everyone is familiar with, right? So how it uses React DOM dot render. This is the default statement which we have to always remember, how a React DOM uses its render function to render our JSS wherever needed. You can render any HTML string and display the static HTML page. And this is the way we are going to make our SSR also possible. Let us see how we are writing the code in express.js. Now, we have to do these all these things same in the server side also. So from that time, we are seeing that we have to do server side rendering, we have to enable the static HTML page and all. So we understood what is that we have actually to do. I have already discussed that there are totally 5 steps to achieve this. The first step is you have to start your Express.js, that part we have completed. The second step is to see that what are all the bindings are there. That is, what are all other scripting files we have included, what are all other CSS files we have included, and any other assets we have included. All these has to bind in one step. For that also, we are going to write the code. And then what we have to do is you have to now create your entire HTML static page. So in order to do that, whatever you're rendering has to be captured and then converted to your static HTML page. So for that, we will make use of our React DOM render itself. And how we are converting that, we will be seeing soon. And finally, you enable your server-side scripting. This part of the entire coding is written in your Express only. You can name the file as server.js in order to understand it clearly. Since we are implementing Express, so I have named it as express.js. So let me check. So this is the place in the server folder. In this folder, we have our express.js file, and we will be populating our div in order to return the response to the browser from the server as intended. That is our static HTML page where we are able to see the entire HTML code. That is the code related to our UI, declarative UI. Let us enter into this coding. So after installation, we will see our config files are ready or not. So that part you can do it here. You have your Babel config ready and your JSON part also ready. So don't worry about what these are exactly, or you have to do something on this. This will happen by default by itself, and you can see how the naming conventions are being used also. So this is the thing. This is the next installation we have done, Webpack, and this file is also automatically generated. And if you need any changes in your node environment, you can do it. You have your node environment JS also. So you can see your dev server and the history API fallback here is true. So this is your development server configuration. And next file which we are interested about is our package.json. The package.json will give you the entire route map of your total application. So what exactly is app? You can see by what name you have created this app, and what is the description you are given. This you can also do directly in the package.json or in your meta tag in whichever way you want. And of course the version you can mention. Now the thing which we understand is once we install our Webpack server, we try to create our node environment development, and also for that you are creating your build also. And this part of the line is very important, which we will be start SSR node server. This line we have to include, and we have to make it understand that you are going to utilize the node environment. And dependencies are automatically given. You can see this one word Axios. Axios is the actual part which will be helping us with the Express.js. It may be quite vague. You may feel that you're going into somewhere or something, but please take some time to analyze that this is nothing but what we have seen in our theoretical part. This for the same thing we are writing the code here. Exactly, we are doing only that part. Now, what I am trying to do is I'm trying to give you the structure also so that you will understand once we install few packages like Babel or Webpack, what exactly happens. Its respective things which we have included in the project appears here. So this is the only part happens in our package. So this is all about package.json. Now let us end it here and let us enter into the actual part, that is our Express.js. So how we are trying to do that. In order to achieve this, the first thing you have to remember is you have to create prop for your Express and as well as your React DOM server. This is by default available in our ReactJS. And we will also be using the React Router DOM. Alright. So there is a path given here, you can find, which I am highlighting. There is a static router and a match path given to your React router. If you observe, it is our React router itself. So just remember this things which we have included. Now, next what we are trying to do is you are trying to create your express. So this is as usual you create with the help of all the functionalities available. And now this part of the component you can utilize wherever you want to import. And the next part is import app component. I have written the import structure here. And next is your routes, the routes whichever you have defined in your router.js. Only we have provided two routes, that one is default route for counter, display by default. Another one is when I click on post, what has to happen. So that part is also included here. And next, what we have to understand, the actual part. We have seen step 1, step 2, step 3. So where is step 1? Step 1 is here. Be able to see we are running our Express server on port 9000. So once it is successfully connected, this message you can see in your console. In order to see in the console, you have to right click your output and give inspect and go to console and check. It will automatically display this message: Express server started at the localhost 9000. We can define a const also, and we can declare this port as a variable, and you can fetch what are all the available port also. In that manner also we can. For now, let us go with the static one. And once completing that, the next part which we have to do is you have to create your assets. So assets in the sense, what are all I have included, like my JS or CSS or whatever, etc. I have included. So for that, this is the syntax. In the syntax, you can observe it as a get. Yes, this get you are utilizing from your HTTP. And inside that, if you observe, there is a JS, CSS, other maps, and I see whichever I want to bind with this. And you can see my express being included here, express.static, path resolved, directory name, and these all bindings are stored in the dist folder. Is it clear? So whenever we run our application to production level, the dist folder will automatically get created. So this is what we know. So by default, what I will do, I will set all these bindings to my dist folder itself. So there is a 2 dot, means you have to come out of the folder level and check where is the folder present. So that is the meaning. So obviously dist will be created in the main level. So every time you go with 2 dots itself. Now, the next part is the binding, which all has to happen with the web application, has been done in all the components. And other thing, the most important one is, for any other request, you have to send index.html as response. For every request, let us suppose the Facebook example itself. Let's go to the example once. So for all these 3 requests, I should send some response. Whether the response is available or not, I should mention that also. Here, it's not possible, that message is also been sent. If the response false, what happens, and response true, what should happen? Everything is being written by default. So now this part we are going to achieve. once you send a request, what should actually happen. So for all these, we are itself writing the code. So that is the main difficulty here. Trying to share my Visual Studio Code. Just give me one moment. So by default, for binding, the same syntax has to be followed. And by default, for listing the server also, we have to follow the same syntax. And in any library, listening to server, the syntax is same. But the only changes will happen for binding and creating responses. All right. Everyone, are you able to see my Visual Studio Code? Is the Visual Studio Code visible? Okay, participants. Again, there was a little bit problem, so I'm sorry for that. I would see that this won't happen again. And let us continue now. So after binding our all the external resources like CSS and then JS and other assets and all into one place, that is the syntax we have seen. Now, next we will see how to write the response. All the part which we have discussed, for all those we have to write the code ourselves. So with the help of HTTP, I am trying to create this part. You know, there is a callback to your request response, and I can include whatever I want. So that is the meaning of asterisk symbol. If you want to customize your request response, you can write those entire constants over here. And next what happens is you have to match all the routes available. So this is the place actually you're caching your routes. So you can see I have created one const where I have my match route, and there I am defining the entire routes to be matched with the original URL, whatever I have written. So this way I am trying to store all the routes written in my application. And the next part, what I am doing is I am following the component lifecycle itself in order to achieve the component of app into this. The same thing we are going to do as the procedure happens with a single component lifecycle. Now what we will do is fetch the data of all the matched components, and we have to assign them with the match attributes. Already routes we have fetched, but then you have to assign the respective components. And the next important part happens is the initial level. Initial level of JS has been accomplished with our Express.js. Once the initialization of index.js happens, the next part is it goes to your app, and thereafter the app route to index.html. Now what we are doing is, we are taking index.html and we give the resolved path, that is where the index.html is present now. Once you read the file sync, you send it with along with the encoding. If you observe here, I have written my own encoding with the help of UTF. Even you can write with the help of JWT also, which is the most common way industrialists do. So in order to understand simply, we have used this. So here you can observe your page has been encoded. Now this part will be done in a very efficient manner with your HTTP AS. Since we are using HTTP, so this part also we have to write. So what I am doing, the FS is already present here. You can find the FS here. I'm using that, and also my path variable, sorry, prop to resolve whatever directory has been given. Okay, so in order to read the index.html file, this we are doing. So now I read my index.html file. Now I understand what I have to render. So this part we will keep it aside. After that, what we will do is, this entire HTML, we are trying to store it as a string. So now this app HTML, what it does is, it is a string, okay? According to our this thing, now we have to convert that entire HTML into a string variable. So in order to achieve that, we have render to string available in our React DOM server. This is the common way we use in server-side rendering. So always we have to use the same syntax. There is no change in the syntax, and the utilization happens with the help of already available functionality, render to string. And we can see that this is available in React DOM server. So here the actual thing is the request of the original URL context to the component data, whichever it has to render. And you can see there is a static router call. This written value is converted to string. Whenever you put whatever you have to render inside and use the function render to string, the entire thing has converted to string. Now you populate your app. That is the app of the web application, the app component, with this string. So instead of giving div id app, okay, now we will be able to see the static HTML page. All right, I will show you the output also. Maybe I'm unable to show the output in the Visual Studio Code because it is crashing again and again. But we can have one lab session to accomplish that. So for now, I will show you exactly what will happen when I try to execute each one of the line. So here what we are doing is we are populating it and we are replacing this div. So now we understand that this part of server-side rendering is exactly what we are coding and we are achieving it. So this div which was appearing initially when we were doing client-side rendering, I am replacing that with my static HTML. This is the prop of static HTML. So this prop we have accomplished through this React DOM server with the help of render to string. So now what is binded here is our static HTML. So whenever you do client-side rendering, this is the next step, important step. Next, what we have is you set a value of initial state global variable. Now this will tell how the component life cycle has to work upon the dig mount and all will be get called. And always you give the headers response status 200, and whenever you go and see into your network response, there will be 200 okay. I will show the screenshot of this also. So finally we have achieved our response successfully, means you get 200 okay. And the content type will be text/HTML itself because it is a static HTML. In this variable, what you are going to get in order to check with that, what you can do is you can give a console.log here and you can check this string. Sorry, don't use double quotations. If you want to check the variable, directly give the variable itself. So in this manner, you can check it. Okay. So now let me go to the PPT. So you have to render it to the string function, which takes an element instance of the component and just like React.DOM render, this will also work. But this is from React DOM from your server, and it will return only HTML string. Already we have written a function render to string, so the entire static page now will be rendered as a HTML string. And instead of populating inside your DOM element, you are directly showing the string itself. So now what happens? Your express.js file and populate div element both are returned before you return the response to the browser. The same thing will be given to your browser also. So now in this place, instead of you seeing this only app, you will be able to see the entire that part only I want to run and show you. So just give me 1 moment. So you'll be getting the entire this one itself. the counter code, whatever we have written and included into our app, right? So we'll be able to see the entire HTML itself. That will actually happen. All right. This part we can check in the lab session itself. So now you can see the screen. In this place, we have seen here while CSSR, it is ID app. And when you come to your application after including Express.js, you can see the entire HTML code is available. I have highlighted this and I've taken the screenshot so you can see that. So this part will happen like this, and once this happens, you can confirm that you have achieved your server-side rendering. Perfect. So participants, I have one request. Can we end this session now and start it again at 1 o'clock? Will that be okay for you all? Every participant is okay with that, I will go with that. And 1 o'clock, we will be seeing how to achieve testing and one example of writing unit test and one example of writing integration test. Thereafter, Ashwini ma'am will continue with how to create a chat application. So please tell me, can we resume at 1 o'clock? Will that be okay? Participants, I am requesting you all. Is it okay? Shall we stop now and continue at 1 o'clock? You can chat, put me message in the chat also. I will take only 1 hour where I will explain you what React testing is and how we are making use of packages of Jest and Enzyme and what is the difference in both these packages. And then I will show you one example to write unit testing and one example to write integration testing. So you will understand how exactly the test cases have been written. And most of the time, we are interested only in unit testing and integration testing. The remaining testings can also be done, but these are the two testings which you write for your HTML front end. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. And I hope you all understood the theoretical part of SSR and how we are writing our code to achieve the understanding of SSR. And once in the lab, we will be trying how to create this express.js and we can finally understand the server part being called. So that part we will do. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.